hi everyone, and welcome to the first Alpha Plus showcase of 2022. If you can see the name portion underneath my, screen, my name's Alethea, and I work with a group of learning tech enthusiasts, so education technologists and organizational development consultants at Alpha Plus, and I'll be facilitating today's sessions on digitizing and organizing activities and learner files. And then joining me from the Alpha Plus staff is Monica, who many of you probably already know and who has been coordinating and organizing a lot of the back end for this event to take place. And she'll be in charge of moderating the chat, as well as like facilitating the slides today, and then leading us into the tech tips at the end of today's session. We also wanted just to call out that we really enjoy the full support of all the other Alpha Plus team members, some of them who are here, some of them who aren't present with us today, but Tracy Allen, our executive director, who I believe will be here with us today, Christine and Guylaine for these showcases. So for our sessions today, we also have the pleasure of welcoming four guest speakers from the literacy programs, who I will introduce in just a few minutes more properly to share us their experiences on today's topic. We're also very happy and grateful to have our two ASL interpreters present with us today, so Gloria and Peggy, to communicate and sign our showcase content. Just by way of a kind of brief intro about the showcases, we're so glad to be continuing these series. As you know, our team at Alpha Plus kind of started with this idea for these series last year, essentially as a result of working with many LBS programs who were doing amazing things, but also who were curious about learning from one another, about different ways to improve teaching and learning in an online first or hybrid space. So our virtual showcases are really meant to showcase some of the creative solutions and ways in which different LBS instructors, administrators, staff, and even learners across our province have been making teaching and learning possible, and even improving it in this kind of digital, or now they call it phygital, which is like physical and digital space. So can go to the next slide, Monica.
Absolutely. And as I do that, I just want to mention, because we enabled that and Alethea didn't know, we enabled closed captioning on our Zoom session today. It may not show for everyone, but if you look at the tools at the bottom and you look for CC or under more, there should be live captioning option. If you want to turn it on or try it, see how it works for you. If you don't like it, you can turn it off as well.
Amazing. Thanks for that note, Monica. It's good to know. So yeah, before we get right into the showcase content today, we just wanted to take a brief moment to acknowledge the land and the Indigenous people of all the lands that we're on today. So while we meet on a virtual platform, we just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge the importance of these lands, which we call home. And we do this to reaffirm our commitment and our responsibility in improving relationships between nations, and to improving our own understanding of local Indigenous peoples and their cultures. From coast to coast to coast, we acknowledge the ancestral and unceded territory of all the Inuit, Métis, and First Nations people that call this land home.
Right.
Thanks, Monica. We can maybe move to the agenda slide. So yeah, here's a quick look at our agenda for today. The first part, which will be about an hour and a half, we'll focus on our panel discussions, and then we'll move into the breakout rooms at around 3 p.m. We'll take a quick 5-minute break, and then we'll resume at 3:30 for part 2 of today's virtual showcase, led by my extraordinarily talented colleague, Monica, who will lead the tech Q&A. So that's kind of just a quick overview for today.
Right.
And then I'll have the pleasure of introducing the guest speaker. So Monica, you can tab to the next slide. Thank you. So as I mentioned, this showcase is really all about showcasing the incredible work that LBS programs are carrying out to support their staff, their learners, and their day-to-day operations. It's really something for the LBS sector by the LBS sector. And so we're really honored to be joined by these education champions and their programs today. So first we have Ambreen Ahmad, who is Managing Director at the Metro Toronto Movement for Literacy. We're also joined by Angela Parkin, who is manager of the LBS and learner intake at Hamilton-Wentworth District School Board. And then we have Anita Hillis-Krause, who is executive director at Haldimand-Norfolk Learning Center. And then we have with us Rosemary Asubonteng. I'm really sorry if that's the improper pronunciation, who is an adult literacy learner at the Learning Place. Accompanied by Sandy Sadsad, who is executive director at the Learning Place. So again, thank you so much for being here with us. To our guest speakers, we're really looking forward to hearing what you have to share with us. So welcome to our panel discussion. Very, very happy to kick things off. Maybe we can go to yeah, perfect. Monica, you're so in sync. So our first question to kick off these discussions is basically just a quick roundtable. So if you could briefly tell us a bit about yourself, your role and your organization. I have a speaking order, so I'll just, if it's possible, so maybe I'll put it in the chat. So I have Anita going first, and then Angela, Ambreen, and then Rosemary and Sandy. Maybe I'll put that in the chat so that we can remember that. And then, yeah, you can go ahead. And Anita, the floor is yours.
Let me spotlight you as well, Anita, just so that we can see you as well.
Just what I always wanted to have the spotlight on me.
Of course, right?
Of course. Well, thank you very much for having me today. And I've seen a lot of familiar faces and some new faces. So welcome, everyone. My name is Anita Hillis-Krause, and I'm the Executive Director of the Haldimand-Norfolk Learning Centers. The Haldimand-Norfolk London Learning Centers. And we provide adult literacy program delivery and so much more. As you all know, those of you that are in adult literacy, we provide wraparound services. We have incredible community networking and community partners, and we all have a passion for what we do.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Anita. That's a great overview. I guess we can pass the ball to Angela.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Angela Parkin. I am the Literacy and Basic Skills and Learner Intake Manager for Hamilton-Wentworth District School Board. And here we are co-located with Adult Credit and ESL. So we work a lot with those programs to support kind of movement through to completion for OSSD. But then we also have targeted training programs, which is short-term programs covering things from food handling certification to G1 test prep for getting the first level of your license, to computer basics, and the new Better Jobs Ontario program as well that we're just about to roll out. And then we also have specialized programming for adults with developmental disabilities who want to work on their skills for just for greater independence or for employment, and in a greater degree recently to get their diploma as well.
Thanks so much, Angela. Sounds like a very comprehensive suite of services that that HWDSB covers. So, Ambreen, you want to go next?
Sure. Thank you so much, first of all, Alpha Plus, for inviting me and giving me a chance to speak today. My name is Ambreen Ahmad. I'm the Managing Director at Metro Toronto Movement for Literacy. MTMO, that's how we call it, is a nonprofit organization, and we were established in 1978. We're different from the rest of the panelists, so we are a support organization. So we advocate adult literacy. We're not directly in touch with learners, but we have, as we call them, service providers. So 33 different service providers across Toronto and York region who come under our umbrella. So we spread awareness, we try to collaborate with them, we do professional development, and we promote lifelong learning. So our organization since last year is remote, since 2 years actually. COVID is 2 years. Yes. Yeah, thank you.
So yeah, it's the 2 years. It seems like so long, and yet it's kind of like yesterday too that the world kind of changed. So Rosemary and Sandy, would you go ahead and introduce yourselves?
Yeah, sure. Rosemary, if you don't mind, I'll take the lead on this particular question. So my name is Sandy Sadzad. Rosemary is one of our learners who's also joining us, but she will be able to contribute a little more meaningfully in subsequent questions. But our organization is called The Learning Place, and we've been around since 1985, so a very long time. It's been a couple of iterations that we've existed, so we haven't been called The Learning Place for that entire time. In past years, we've been called the Peel Literacy Guild, or SELF as well. And up until recently, I would say maybe about 10 years ago, we are now operating as the Learning Place. We are extensively funded by the Ministry of Labour, Training and Skills Development, primarily focusing on our LBS, Language and Basic Skills program. And what we've added to that Language and Basic Skills program is also digital literacy, which is a huge and very, very popular workshop for us. And we have a lot of learners who have expressed interest in getting into the digital literacy space in addition to LBS, clearly because the pandemic has highlighted with a big flashing light, some basic digital literacy skills you definitely need to have. We're located in Brampton. Brampton is our primary headquarters. We also have a secondary location in Mississauga. And in addition to LBS, we also have a developmental disabilities program for adults aged 18 and up. Occasionally we'll take some folks that might be a little bit younger than 18, but really our focus is adults with developmental disabilities. And we cover those particular programs both in person as well as via Zoom. And we also have special interest, primarily employability skills focused workshops that are just sort of, if you like a topic, any learner or anyone out there that might get our flyer is welcome to join in the developmental disability space as well. And we're also pulling together a program which we are calling our employment program, in addition to working with some local community partners that are focused on employment. So we'll teach the employability skills component, and then we have our partnerships that will take on the employment placement component. So we're running that for not only our developmental disabilities program, but also the general population. So we're super excited about that and looking forward to being successful in that, teaching a lot of those employability skills that the labor market has reported as gaps. So really happy to be here and looking forward to sharing more and also listening more to some of the creative and innovative ideas that you guys are utilizing.
Awesome. Thank you so much for introducing your program and services, Sandy, and a bit of the history too. I see Manal is here as well from the Learning Place. Would you like to do a brief intro of yourself, and I'm not sure, is Rosemary also gonna do a brief intro, or how? I guess I leave it up to you to organize how you'd like to.
Yeah, I think we're good to move forward. Rosemary doesn't have too much to say necessarily about this particular slide, but we have some other areas where Rosemary is really, really excited and anxious to contribute to.
Awesome. So should we move to question 2 then? So this is, I guess, us getting into the heart of our discussions and what these innovations or kind of day-to-day experiments on improving learning and teaching are all about. So really, if I'm kind of asking, I guess, in this question for you to lay the groundwork about the main challenges that you as programs have faced in digitizing and organizing your files, your folders and activities, and or the learner files. And so to start us off, I will ask Ambreen, and then the order will be Ambreen, Anita, Rosemary, Sandy, basically the learning place, and then Angela. I'll put that order again in the chat just so that we have that there. So Ambreen, floor is yours.
Okay, thank you.
Ambreen,
So,
just before you forget, this is Monica. Don't forget to share your slides.
Okay, you want me to share?
Yeah.
Okay. So it says this will stop other screen sharing.
Yeah,
Do you
go
want
for it. Go for it.
Okay. So I joined MTML last year, January 9, 2021. And the first problem that we had at that time was digitization. We are just 2 staff members and we wanted to go remote permanently. So what about the hundreds, and I call them thousands because they're thousands of papers, but hundreds of files. So our first step was digitization. And I remember that we started doing research on hiring a company to do that, but that was very costly. So what we did was we bought a scanner, a really good scanner. Honestly, it cost about $500. And we hired a digitization assistant. So I worked with that assistant and I went through all the files because again, we were established in 1978. So we had all folders and files that were from way back. And it was a very good opportunity, not only for me to learn about the organization, but also just, scan and pick a filter, whatever had to be stored or whatnot. So it was a process that took around a month and a half. And we were 2 people who were working on it. The work of the assistant was to scan and store on the computer. And then we turned to Google Drive. So we digitized everything. We started storing it on Google Drive. I think it was just recent when I joined that we had turned to Google. We had created Gmail accounts, so we all had that storage. And it's free for nonprofit organizations. So it was easier for us to store everything over there. Previously, we had OneDrive. And OneDrive, I think that's really, Monica, just correct me if I'm wrong. OneDrive is related to Microsoft. So that was where, okay.
Yes.
So I think at that time, we were having problems of accessibility because some of the files were so old that the previous way back staff, they did not set up the settings correctly. We couldn't access those documents. Everything had to be downloaded in order for anyone to view it. So that's why turning to the drive was a good one. The second thing is that now that we have Google Drive, all new folders had to be created according to the requirements of the board. So our board can now easily access all those folders because they've been added as members on the drive. So initially, it was very difficult to digitize everything because it's a lot of work. But I think in a month and a half, and it took us, let's just say 2 weeks of full-time work. Everything was digitized. And now it's easily accessible to the board members. So let's suppose if you've got a treasurer who does not require any accessibility or does not want to see the folders that are there for HR. So when everything's on the drive, you can set up the settings, give access to the treasurer for the finance, but don't give access for the HR department. So I think that has made our life so much easier. That was the very big challenge that we faced.
Great. Thanks for laying that groundwork for us, Ambreen. That was really helpful to understand the situation that was there at the time and why you had to kind of go about innovating to have a solution to resolve and address that. I'm wondering if Anita, you'd like to pick up the baton and tell us about the challenges that your program faced with this particular digitization challenge?
Okay, we have 3 locations: London, Simcoe, and Dunville. And as a result of that, we are primarily rural and have precarious or non-existent internet most of the time. So we have a server and a VPN access to the other learning centers. However, due to the precarious internet, quite often our other centers couldn't access our server. So what we did, we took everything from our server, not everything, no, we've used this as an opportunity to purge, to keep that which is useful, and to transfer it to our shared drives. So then they're accessible from anywhere. So we had just barely begun this process. I think we just agreed to it with Monica, and COVID hit. So then we were scrambling to learn everything, to implement everything, and doing it all remotely. So it wasn't like you could sit next to one of your colleagues, and there are just 7 of us, but we couldn't sit next to one another and sort of go through the process. So it really gives a very clear understanding of what our learners were experiencing. But as a result of that, we've started the process, and I think we're well underway. And then I've taken it a step further, and I have produced a drive for my board, as well as for my bookkeeper, which means I do a lot less driving around because I don't have to deliver things to my bookkeeper now. I just scan it and upload it. And then they just let me know when it's all entered, and then I just file it. So it's very cool in that sense, very efficient. And a little bit later, I'll share some of our organization. But some of the other challenges are some of our staff are just a little more nervous about technology and trying new technologies. It's difficult. We're not all super young. We're not youth. We weren't raised with this. So that was one of our greatest challenges, was to sort of wrap our heads around how does this work and how will it work best for us, and then to find a way that was consistent to file everything that we all agreed upon, which was interesting in and of itself. So I'll leave it at that and let the next person have their turn.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Anita, and appreciate that you covered not only, I think, the challenge with the process, but it's also interesting you touched in the last part about how that challenge impacted like the staff and their comfort levels with technology. So that's very interesting. Looking forward to unpacking that. I'll pass then let's pass the ball to Manal or Sandy, Manal, Rosemary, however you'd like to coordinate. The floor is yours.
Great. I'll take a little bit of an overview and just mention a few points. And then Rosemary, you want to be able to contribute as well, just from a learner lens. I'll talk a little bit more from an organizational lens, okay? Yeah, so we've had some similar challenges that we've had to overcome that both Ambreen and Anita have shared. And fortunately, or however you want to look at it, when the pandemic did hit, we were at the end of our fiscal, which was March of 2020. And we were starting our new fiscal in April. And we have a lot of paper files up until that point that were just stored off site. There was just so much paper to contend with. And we don't get the kind of funding which would allow us to find a place off-site and to be able to rent a storage unit with the growing number of boxes that we have. So it was a bit of a blessing for us that it was in that moment when the pandemic was just taking hold, we decided that we were going to start our new fiscal with all digitized files. So that was a lot of learner files that were converted over, especially learners that were in mid-program. And of course, any new learners that joined during that time when we were in lockdown automatically were digitized. And so we went through a similar process that Anita had mentioned, on agreeing on what do the learner file content need to be, what does the folder structure need to be, how do we address different components of data that we have to collect for each learner, how do we manage documenting some of the milestones that we have to submit within CAMS and to the ministry. So we were kind of under the gun on how we wanted to do that. But fortunately, we have some really capable and very headstrong staff that really wanted to implement a vision which they had prior to me joining. And this was just the perfect condition to now implement that. And successfully, we were able to continue on with in April 2021 and into April 2022. And we've never looked back in terms of having learner files that are paper now. So now anyone can access anything on our OneDrive, even if it's, you know, a different learner than your particular instructor was the primary go-to for. Now everyone's got access to everything. So that was a really big win for us. And of course, a huge savings because we no longer had to store the amount of files we were storing off-site. We were able to scale that down dramatically. So that was a big win. We still do, mind you, have some old learner files, but as the years go by, it just becomes less and less. And it was also a really good opportunity, like Anita had mentioned, for us to purge as well and to utilize our space a little bit better. And of course, with everything being digitized, we were able to take advantage of a lot of the security that we always had security, but now is just that much more secure with everything being loaded up on OneDrive and in a common place that was secure. So we had some initial shocks with the pandemic, but we overcame them, and you know they are just sort of our standard operating procedures now. Over to you, Rosemary. I'm just going to hand it over, and if you could just share with this group some of the experiences that you've had as you've been with our program, and how digital or technology has really helped shape your experience and educational journey. You're on mute.
Sorry about that. Before I joined this group, I didn't know anything. I was kind of like nowhere in the world. And I know that the world is now digitalization thing going on. So I found it very challenging to search for emails. I didn't even know how to write email. I didn't know how to do anything. Besides searching for specific emails, I did not know how to open email, attachments, save them on desktop, and also attach documents to emails. I was not aware that it was possible for me to edit PDFs. I did not have any skills in joining, managing, or doing anything on virtual meetings. So when I came to the school, I learned a lot. Like now, I'm able to type, I'm able to do meetings on Zoom, like even the churches sometimes, like there's programs that like I'm able to join on Zoom, and I'm now enrolled in a college, and I'm able to do everything on Zoom thanks to the learning place. The teachers there were so good to me, and they had patience with me and try to show me everything. Sometimes I come to classes crying because like I'll have a homework and I don't know what to do, but they will sit me down and encourage me and try and show me what to do. So now I'm getting there, and I'm proud of myself. And I want to take this opportunity to thank all the teachers at the learning place and encourage other people who are going through the same situation that I'm in to give themselves a chance and look for the learning place to learn. Thank you.
Alicia, thank you so much, Rosemary. Alicia, if you can give me just a chance to talk about Rosemary's experience.
Yeah, go for it.
Excellent. So my name is Manal. I'm the Digital Literacy Program Manager at the Learner Place. We have a great experience with Rosemary as a successful learners. Rosemary had an experience with us, the virtual meetings and in-person learner. Rosemary joined us because she needed help to improve her digital literacy skills to be able to manage during COVID, manage her education. And also she was looking to improve her, like she wanted to continue her education and she wanted to join career college. So like she just came at the right time when in February we had a chance just to open a small class under safety and health restrictions to support the learners who really needed support in using like digital devices, and they needed one-on-one support. So we had a chance to support based on the capacity, we were able to support learners like Rosemary. We helped Rosemary in using different type of digital tools to be able to join virtual meeting skills, using Zooms, participating and integrating in class virtually. And also we helped her on organizing or creating a system that will help her organize her work online, share her work with the instructor, like sharing PDF, creating attachment, organizing her work in files based on subjects, etc. So Rosemary now just doing a great job, and she really managing a lot of tools. As you see, virtual, like she's participating in Zoom, she's able to join meetings, and she's improving. So we're happy to have you, Rosemary. You're a successful story for us, and thanks for being here today. Thanks for giving me the time.
Thanks so much, Manal. It's always nice to hear these success stories from the field. And I think it's a testament to how much I think organization goes a long way too. Just like seems so simple, but even organizing our files can make a big difference, especially as we're now working so much in the digital space. So I feel like that's a great segue to Angela. I had the pleasure of working with Angela this past year, and I think she's kind of an organizational queen for the files, but I'll let you take it away, Angela.
Thanks, Alethea. Yes, I think Monica's going to share a slide there. Thanks, Monica. So similar to what was previously mentioned, my focus was on the learner files. During COVID, when everyone was working from home, we ended up with these sort of hybrid learner files where you have the paper files in the office and the digital files at home, and everything just kind of became decentralized. Instructors had the learner files on their staff laptops, so like they're kind of secure, but also not incredibly secure. And when we had come back, there seemed to be an expectation initially that we would keep our paper files. So instructors were spending hours when we did return the 1st September, just printing stuff off, which seemed ridiculous. And during the COVID time, I do registrations for our new learners, so I needed a system where I could easily share the file then with the instructor that would be where the learner would go, depending on which class they wanted and which program they needed. So I needed to be able to have something that could transfer safely to that individual instructor. And some of the challenges that came up to trying to fully digitize learner files as time went on, we decided like we don't need to have filing cabinets full of papers with learner files. We could, since we started already, we could kind of do some tweaking to, this sort of roughshod system we'd set up during COVID and make something more permanent. So looking into that more, obviously security and privacy were big issues for us. And the conversation around document shelf life came up as I learned that sometimes with programs like Google and OneDrive, there's sort of like an end date for certain files. Like if I guess you can set it to last forever or not delete them, or they may not stay there. And I wasn't sure what that process looked like of, I need my files to stick around for 7 years after we exit a learner requirements. So I can't have them like disappearing because they weren't being used or whatever might be the case. So there's concerns about that. I wanted a system for our staff that was easily accessible, similar to what had been mentioned. We have sort of a range of skills in terms of technology and a range of comfort for our instructors, and so we wanted something that was accessible as much as possible to everybody. And then wanted a central location, wanted to get the files off the instructor laptops and into one space. And that kind of led us to really thinking about these files as being, wanting them to be ministry ready. So we did hear from some of our counterparts at different programs who did do audits during COVID, and they were required to submit all of the files for audit electronically to a central database for the ministry. And so for that program manager, they had to submit their files, and again, hours of then scanning after all the files had been printed out to fill the files, hours of scanning them back into the computer to submit them to this database. So the idea was that, you know, potentially maybe we would have a file that was pretty much ready to hand off to the ministry if they asked for it. And then we would just keep a separate file that was more like the instructor's day-to-day learner file, where they'd have sort of like their, you know, their lessons or activities. But this would just be like, here's all the main documents that that the ministry might request. Other issues that came up was uniformity. Kind of uncover this as we go, where, you know, you kind of provide like a instruction, like here's what we're going to do, and then you kind of see like people have slightly different interpretations of those instructions, and so we'd end up with like little inconsistencies across different users, and so really trying to like tighten that up a little bit, so that we did have, you know, similar looking files, and again, so that it falls into that ministry ready category. And then the final piece was that based on what we need to do, when we exit a learner from our file, we were required to follow up with them at 3, 6, and 12 months. And there's a form that we need to fill out. And so my current filing system is to have, you know, all these forms divided up by month and just kind of move them along. So if I exited someone today in May, the 3 months, I would stick them in the August. I count my months, stick them in the August folder, and then I could just grab the whole pile and start making phone calls or emails and that kind of thing. And so we needed to be able to like easily see where all those exits were, so we weren't like constantly like opening and having to click through like a whole bunch of, you know, folders to dig down to get to the one document we needed and update it, so we could have them all in one place. So it's not just documents in one place, but there's also like a workflow involved as well. So how can we sort of like make sure that, you know, documents don't get lost as we maybe are moving them to different folders to make sure that, you know, the follow-ups happen on time, while also making it easy for people to you know, complete the task and find things where they need them later on. So those are some of our big questions. The one other one that I would add to that I was thinking about later in terms of challenges is sometimes the organization IT restrictions that end up being put on different programs. So I try and like learn about OneDrive or Google Classroom, or not Google Classroom, but Google Drive. I try to learn about the different programs to be like, okay, yes, does this work for my program? And then as I started exploring it more or trying to set something up, you'd run into like roadblocks that IT had put up for different restrictions. And so you really have to not just rely on sort of outside information, but then have a dialogue with IT as well to kind of figure out like what parameters are even in place surrounding my organization and the different programs.
That's great. That's such a like pragmatic point to note as well, especially as I think like all organizations and depending on the programs, they'll have a different configuration with regards to their tech stack and the IT security. So that's a great point to note. I have a question for you from the audience, Angela, and it's just like around if you could clarify what you mean by shelf life. I think it was one of the points on around the challenges like document shelf life.
Sure. So in my reading, so this is something to check also with your IT, however big or small that department might be, is one of the things I had been reading was that some programs like OneDrive won't let you keep files there forever. Something, I don't know what the process is to like, do they notify you that like your end date is coming for certain files, or do they just kind of like disappear because they haven't been active for X amount of time? I don't know what that piece looks like, but that came up in my reading. And so I had to check that with our IT because once we close a file, as I had mentioned, we need to keep those files for 7 years before we can shred them or destroy them or delete them, which will be so much easier. So our IT said, no, we've set it so that like nothing will ever be removed. But that was something that we did need to be concerned about, just to make sure our files didn't, randomly disappear on us. And then the ministry's asking, where are your 7 years worth of files? And I have to say they're out there somewhere in the abyss.
Right. That's great. And yeah, thanks for clarifying that. It's interesting how it seems like even in the digital space, things have expiry dates sometimes, depending on how the IT has set that up. So that's good. And I think it's connected to like your last pragmatic point about checking with IT about those parameters. So thank you for that. And thanks for painting. I think it was really, I feel like the backdrop that you painted with the challenges is really multifaceted. So I'm looking forward to the next question. I think we could probably jump into question 3, which is around how did you programs overcome the challenges that you just shared with us? What approaches and tools did you try? What worked for you? And to start us off, the first speaker that we have will be, it will be the learning place. So Sandy, Manal, Rosemary, however you'd like to coordinate that. And then I'll put the order in the chat. They will be followed by Angela, and then Ambreen, and then Anita. So Sandy and Manal, Rosemary, the floor is yours.
I can go, and then Manal, if you want to contribute a little bit more, because you're a little closer from an instructor standpoint. Like I did mention on the prior question, some of those challenges and how we address them really was that, we had to move quickly. We had to make some decisions. When I specifically, look at how the ministry will be looking at our file makeup. So we really did have a quick meeting around, what does this need to look like, so that if we are audited, then there's a reasonable case for us to be saying to the ministry that due to the pandemic and our inability to access the paper copies and paper files, we really just needed to move to a digital platform. And so we tried to copy sort of what the ministry requirements and contents were. And so when you look at our digital files and you look at an old paper copy file, they're very, very similar in content. And that was by design because there was no particular guidance from the ministry on how to do this. So we figured since the ministry already has approved this type of content in a paper file, we will do the same. And specifically around getting milestones accomplished, or if there's any communications that had to happen between a learner and an instructor to achieve a milestone result, we would also save those emails as well, because by this time, that particular learner typically would have had some comfort level in email. So we would save those emails as proof of accomplishing a particular milestone. And for those lower level learners that already had low level digital literacy skills pre-COVID, we weren't able to service them as much as we would have liked. And our quickest way to get around that, which was not a digitized approach, which is if you'd like to come and pick up work from the center, we would have a predetermined appointment time where you could come and grab some of that work. And then when you wanted to drop it off for the instructor to mark it and give you some feedback, then it would be another predetermined time for a drop off. So we overcame some of those challenges, both for some of the higher level learners who were able to function on a digital platform, as well as the lower level learners who weren't able to. So we wanted to make sure that there was minimal interruption, because the pandemic interrupted our life drastically in and of itself. A few other things that we also took into account and used to solve problems was that we did not put a lot of our stuff on OneDrive, and we did not, use the Google Suite to store information. We actually have our own segregated array of hard drives that serves to be our file repository, which means that, there wasn't OneDrive challenges, there wasn't file shelf life challenges that we would have had to face. And so we have been using that particular tool as our central repository for all information, whether it's learners, whether it's just projects we're working on, whether it's documents that we need to have access to. And that particular platform, it's called Syncology. We're using the product called DiskStation. That particular platform can be accessed anywhere, even from home. So you don't have to be in our network to be able to access it. And so that allowed us to fully be functional at home remotely for an unlimited period of time. Because we have seen challenges with OneDrive, we have seen challenges with Google Suite, and so we elected not to use those platforms. Manal, I don't know if you've got anything to contribute on some additional things we could have used. And then Rosemary, of course, your experience on how you communicated digitally with those instructors that helped you along the way.
Okay, Rosemary, could you tell us what kind of challenges you had, how you came over those challenges, and what tools the most support you? What did you use, as a digital tools?
Like the learning place, they taught me how to do how to use Zoom to do my work at the same time to work with my instructor whilst I'm on Teams. Like the college that I'm going now, they are using Teams. So before I was being taught Zoom. So I came and I explained it to Miss Manal, and then she took time with Miss Alicia, and then they taught me about the Teams, Microsoft Teams, and they helped me to organize my work and helped me to access everything that I need. So now I'm able to do my work. I'm able to communicate with my other friends at school. We're able to do projects and other things, and I'm happy now than when I went to learning place, and I'm getting better and better every day. And even still, like sometimes when I do not submit my assignment from the literacy place, like the teachers will call me and then help me out. The things that I cannot do, they will like have time for me to explain things to me, and I'm getting there. I'm getting there day by day. They are helping me because like I'm now doing college work and at the same time to trying to continue my English skills at the learning place.
Okay, thank you, Rosemary. Okay, I just let Rosemary talk before because I want to connect how we as instructors, learners using digital technology in meeting with the instructor, managing their files. So we focused on helping learners in using virtual meeting platforms like Zoom or Team, Microsoft Team, and at the same time being able to communicate with the instructor or using their file during the virtual meeting. Also, we use different type of tools like Google Classroom. Sometimes we organize some documents or exercises for the learners. And we train the learners in using Google Classroom to be able to share files and documents. We did the same with Google Sites.
Thanks so much for that overview, Manal, of how you addressed those challenges that you were facing at the outset. And Sandy, Manal, and Rosemary, thanks for contributing to that question. So I guess let's jump to Angela. If you could share how you overcame those challenges that you just spoke with us just earlier.
Okay. So our ultimate solution ended up to be SharePoint. We had some issues with OneDrive as well, and one of the main issues was that I was trying to set up a filing system, but as you share folders or try and share folders with specific people but not others, it ends up sort of breaking up the system. And I really needed, for organization, and so people could again find things easily, I really needed that structure to stay in place. As it would be equivalent to, you know, one person puts one file in a filing cabinet, but the other person would put the same file back in a different filing cabinet, and it's like, okay, well, where is it? So we really needed it to stay the same and consistent across staff. So OneDrive is more individualized, and so we needed something that had a bit more cohesion to it. The setup of SharePoint is ultimately offering some other pieces. So when you set up a SharePoint, you get attached to it that you can kind of organize how you like. It also gives you a Microsoft team, and so one of the initial issues with wanting to go to SharePoint and why we didn't go that way initially, we started with OneDrive and had to move over, was because of the security issues. We had initially been told that if we set up a SharePoint, all of our continuing education and anybody who had access to continuing education would have access to those folders, and that's not going to be okay in terms of privacy and accessing our learner files. So it turned out, though, with further discussion with IT, that it came up that, like, oh, I can actually set you up something separate that can be standalone outside of continuing education. You can be your own little LBS SharePoint, and then only the people who I invite to SharePoint can see it. So that made it much more secure, and then I could have some control over who was seeing the files as well. Also within the SharePoint, the IT could set up a corporate, it's called a team or something equivalent to that. And so it looks different from like a Teams classroom, has a few different functionalities, and you don't get like, you know, class notebook and things like that where, you know, because you're not entering grades or anything. So that made it a little bit more applicable to what we want to use it for. It also, in kind of exploring this and coming back to SharePoint, I could see some opportunities to expand. So Alethea was showing me a little bit more about like the SharePoint page. And so I could see like potential for using that as sort of a landing ground for onboarding new staff. You could put some videos on there of, you know, to quickly show them how to use, you know, our databases or where to find certain files, how the system works. Things like that. It links also to OneNote, so you can start a OneNote page. And so I've put now our meeting minutes in that zone, so anyone can go back. They don't need to go digging through their emails to find the attachment I sent with the meeting minutes. They can just go to our Teams page and find, I've just divided it. I can actually show my screen here and divided it. I think I want to show this. Sorry, I'm not super savvy with sharing my screen with through Zoom, but I'll see how I go here.
Okay.
There we go. So I have have a team set up, so I'll go, sorry, I'll just go back to this one. So we end up with our Teams files, and then we can have our resources page if we want resources, and just in general, we also have the notebook, which we set up so you can have monthly meeting notes, and it has a table of contents that's not showing. There it goes. I'm on a bit of a different laptop today, so it's a little bit slower, but there's a little stack of books here that you can click on. That's a table of contents. There it goes. And then so you can have, it all divided by months to set up your monthly meetings and meeting notes, and have any like action items listed in there for everybody to quickly access. The other piece that I'm working on exploring, just to go to a different team here to show it to you, is Alethea showed me Planner that also fits in with, it can be a standalone program through Microsoft, or you can integrate it with Teams as well. So I'm learning slowly how to integrate it. So I've got it added here. And the thing with Planner is it was trying to solve that workflow issue where we had those 3, 6, and 12 month follow-ups to do, and sort of how do we track that in an easy way for people to see. And so I'll show you, Althea made me this nice little video to kind of show me how it would work. So it would just, Planner creates something called buckets. And so you can create like a little January, February, March bucket, all the months. And then you can put create a little tag with the learner information, and add tags for 3, 6, and 12 months, or tasks as well. So you can cross off the tasks, and then you can just grab the learner tag and move it across to a different month bucket. So you have a nice visual of which learners have their follow-ups to do that month. One of the hang-ups that we discussed with this is that if we have like loads of learner follow-ups to do, then your bucket is very full, and so it ends up becoming like very long. So I'm gonna test it out with the follow-ups. I haven't got that started yet, but I think I'll try and pilot that in the summer when I know I won't have too many follow-ups to do, just to kind of see how the flow works. But the other thing that I am piloting with it right now is actually with a new program that we're getting together to start next month. And so in this, I've got, this will have the learner's initials. And so here it's going to be, have a self-paced online component as well as an in-person component. So this is more for both the instructor and the learner themselves can see this. So that's why you need to use initials instead of names, because everyone will be able to see this. But so I've got my buckets here with the learner, and I was able to put, they have different task group assignments. And so each group has a few different assignments underneath. And you see I've just got things generically labeled right now, just to kind of see how the space works and how the flow would work. But as learner 1 completes a task, I can cross it off, and so I can know what they've done and what they haven't done so far. And if you accidentally cross off things that you don't want, you can always take it back fairly easily and go, oh no, they didn't actually turn that in. So it just will help us see very easily like what they've still got to do, and the learner can see this as well, going like, okay, I've done assignment 1 and 2, I'm working on number 3, and they can see themselves moving through there. Like I said, if it was the monthly calendar where I needed to move them to a different bucket. So here I won't need to move them to a different bucket, but it's just a click and drag. I could put them over in a different bucket if I wanted to, and shuffle them around that way. So I'm still exploring it, but it seems like it could be a good option, especially if I have like one particular program has a couple of teachers who work more as a team, and I could see that it would be beneficial if they both wanted to be able to do follow-ups, and so then you could just have your setup through Planner, and they could check things off as they were doing them, but both of them could access Planner to kind of see what's been done and what's still needed. And Monica, could you just go back to one slide just so I can see if there's anything else I wanted to hit on for this one, please?
We're back.
Thank you. We're back. Oh yeah, so with file sharing, with SharePoint as well, you can sync the channels. So it's in Teams, you've got like different channels that can be private or open. And so you can also sync them to file to go in through Teams every time to get to your learner files. You can just open your regular like documents folder on your desktop or your laptop, and it will be part of the left side panel menu with all the folders there. So it made it a lot easier. And through that method, you can also open and edit Adobe PDFs, whereas you can't, unless you have like a special add-on, you can't access them and edit them in Teams. It's the Microsoft Adobe not fully talking to each other piece, but that's resolved through accessing it through File Explorer. And my solution for the workflow, and while I'm still playing with Planner, is just to rename the folder. So I put in a 3, 6, and 12 as I complete the follow-ups. So I know if it's got a 3 in front of it, the 3 month has been completed and we're waiting on the 6, and so on. And if you could just move forward there, Monica. Just a quick demo. So this is just showing where the notebook is, but I showed you that. And then here's this sample on the right here of I opted for the uniformity piece just to create a learner plan template folder. So every time we are registering a new learner, it's just a copy. We just copy the folder, rename it with the learner's name, and replace name again with the learner's name on these different folders and pieces. And then it's done. We set up a new learner file in about, I don't know, 2 minutes, and they are all the same. So this bottom picture here on the right is just the inside of the intake document. So it just shows everything's there. It's also, we found it's helpful that if you replace things as you complete them and just change the name as they're completed, then the things that are left end up being placeholders. So it's really easy to see, oh, I don't have this person's transcript yet because the file hasn't been replaced with a real one, or I haven't like gotten their benchmarks yet, whatever the case might be. So it's really easy to see.
Angela?
Yes. Yes.
Can you hear me? It's the interpreter.
Yes.
When you said that last piece about, I'm not really sure what you said. It was about, I totally lost you.
It was the placeholder. Becomes a placeholder.
Yeah, I don't get that. Can you?
That piece. Okay, sorry, sure. And I see there's a question from Sarah in the chat. So because it's a template, it's really easy for us to, like, I would change, for example, 1, 2, and 3. As I did the registration, I would change them to be the completed file, and name would get changed and renamed to the learner's actual name. But for example, maybe the person didn't have their transcript when they first saw me. So I would just leave it there as name. And so when I'm going through my learner files, I can see, oh, this one still has name instead of like being a PDF or being changed to the actual learner's name. So it must not be there yet. So that thing is still missing from the file, but I can quickly see that it's missing because of a placeholder document there, like a dummy document. So this is just blank for now. I just have it there so I can put a document name in and go, oh yeah, a transcript is still needed. Does that make more sense?
I think we can safely, unless they let us know, Peggy and Gloria, if you need further clarification.
I saw thumbs up, so.
Yeah, it sounds good. Awesome. Yeah, I do see while you've been demoing, there have been different questions that have accumulated in the chat for you, Angela. So I'm wondering, but then I wonder what's the best way to address them in stream, or maybe if you've prepared a sequence, I guess up to you if you want to address some of them at the end, or take some of them while you're demoing. How would you like to?
I'm not sure what you mean by if I've prepared a sequence.
I guess if you're in the middle of sharing your train of thought, did you want to like, so I didn't want to
Oh
interrupt.
no, my thoughts are all done now. That was kind of everything I was going to share. So
Okay, amazing. So maybe, I mean, there was a question before Sarah asked her question, but you could, and I know, I think it was related to Carrie Skills Upgrading Program question too, around Google versus Microsoft. Like, what was your biggest reason going the Microsoft direction versus Google? Or maybe that's something that was out of your control, like, period, but I guess you could
it
speak
was.
to that.
Yeah, it was. I mean, yeah, it was like we had the board up until I think the September after COVID started, and it was planned that we were going to be phasing it out and moving exclusively to Microsoft. So it just made sense to try and like stick with what we had. And then in exploring like what options could work, it just kind of seemed like initially OneDrive, but then finally SharePoint seemed like it could work. And then when I saw how it could integrate to some of the other like potential ideas and have it all in one place, it made sense. It made sense that way to then try and have things in one place.
Right. Yeah. So I guess it's kind of the journey to discover all the different functionalities that are in the Microsoft suite.
Yeah, and we do run into some challenges. Sorry, Althea. Like for example, our learners don't get school board addresses. So, we do have some challenges using Teams and being able to have the full functionality of Teams because they're always guests. And so they can't share a screen or do some of the pieces that you would hope that they could do. So those end up being challenges more on the learning side.
Right.
But so far, in terms of the sort of like admin pieces, it seems to fit well.
Right. Yeah, it's good. It's a good call out. I guess a lot of the other comments were around the planner video, because I think there's quite a bit of interest that you stimulated from showing that. I know, yeah, exactly. Like the little preview. I feel like we'll have to invite you back once you've done your summer exploration. I'm sure a number of us are curious to see how you like figure things out, or how you work things out with your trial there, and see how that works out for you. But yeah, there was kind of something that was a question, and just around the planner video, maybe sharing that, if that's okay with you. I think there was a question around whether we could share the kind of video around moving the buckets, the planner.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything that I haven't shared already about what we're trying to do, or there's no like learner information in it. It's a demo. So yes, kudos to Althea for putting it together. And I learned about Loom in this process as well, which I went, maybe for those training videos I want to put on SharePoint.
Right.
Check out Loom for that.
Yeah, I do feel like for everything. Yeah, exactly. It's interesting because I think for everything that we've been talking about, sometimes it's hard to explain just through words, or, so it's just helpful to see the screen and how people are actually setting things up. So I find that Loom tool is pretty helpful for showing the live stream of the screen too. So that's great. I think there's another question. But yeah, we'll just have to kind of move on, to the next. We'll save, I know there's like another few questions from Melody. Maybe we could hop back to that, but let's, or Angela, if you would like to answer Melody directly in the chat. But for now, let's move to Ambreen from MTML. And then, yeah, like the floor is yours.
Thanks you. Again. Can you see my screen of overcoming challenges? I hope you can't see my other screen.
Yes, we can.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
So while I was listening to Angela, very good information. I just also remembered that what did we keep out of the digitization files? So I know that it is a ministry requirement that 7 years of information has to be there. They could check at any time. So we made sure that we scanned all those folders and files and put it on our Google Drive. The rest, we just send it to shredding, and shredding was done from a professional company, so the privacy issue was not a problem. We also kept the constitution and bylaws, just the initial documents required just those hard copies. And that's a very small file or folder, hard copy, which the board keeps. When we turned to, we did the opposite of what Angela did. So we turned from OneDrive to Google Drive. And it was honestly thanks to Alpha Plus. The first thing we did was they took training. I mean, I thought I was also good at Google, but training is so important. So Monica is the one who provided us training. We arranged within, let's say, 2 months, our staff and board got trained on what are the different tools that you can use for collaborating or even communicating within the organization. So we used, so that training was done. And I know that the training last year, we provided some training even to our practitioners or instructors in the LBS field. And it's there on the, I can just quickly share the link where you can find those recorded sessions. And what's great is that we have everything on our Google Drive. So it's a great place to store content. We used Docs, Google Docs, Forms, and Sheets. Now, what I'll tell you, when I joined, it was very difficult for us to be on the same page. And especially when you're working remotely, you're not meeting, you're not passing by each other and, you know, talking, okay, what did you do? I put it there, that's it. So we had to come up with something where we all had to be on the same page. So initially, I know last year we used Google Sheets to create action plans, which was very simple. You know, we with timelines, when was it due, who was it assigned to, and it was very easy because you keep on adding sheets to one, let's say, spreadsheet. It's easier to be on the same page. But during that 1 year, we found out that we had to, sometimes people would forget of what their task was. So we had to, the other person was sending reminders. And in order to overcome that, I'll come to the last point towards the end. So we used Google Docs. Now, how this helps is we had to revamp our website. So initially it was WordPress. We're using Google Sites. Again, thanks to Alpha Plus. Thanks especially to Monica. They taught us how to use Google Sites. Again, it's free, right? So it's great to have free stuff to use for your organization purposes. So we created Google Sites. All the documents that we had to upload. So there are 2 ways it helped. First, uploading documents was easy because you just kept that document. So for example, we ask our service providers to send their program flyers. Now they're sending it to us through an email. It comes as an attachment. What we do at our end is we store it on the drive, and then we connect that, we upload that on our Google site. So storage is there. Let's say after 5-10 years, somebody new comes in and they say, what was done in that year? They can go back to Google Drive and see in the folders. So it's a very good storage place. The connection is great because on Google Sites, you can connect videos, you can connect YouTube, you can connect documents. So we use that. The other thing we used Google Docs and even Forms was in our working system, we require a lot of surveys and feedback forms from our service providers. Again, meeting online is totally different, but that regular communication or that feedback is required. And we found that when we had Google Forms, we were using Google Forms, it was easy. We didn't have to, each person was not sending it back to us filled as a separate document. You just created one document, shared the link, and you just, the owner, if we're the owner, we could just go on that link and everybody else's answers or feedback is seen on one document. So we thought that was really great. And this has made our life very easy because compiling surveys becomes, very strenuous. Then we do calendar. Recently we got another project. So in this, because sometimes in an organization, obviously there are meetings. So sharing calendars, if I share it with my staff, they know when we can set up meetings. So again, these are the tools we used. Maps we used, even if you visit our website, mtml.ca, you'll see there's, we've shown locations of all the different service providers. At the back end, yes, there's work to do. But once it's done, then it's just brushing up of other aspects on, let's say, maps. So these were some of the tools we used. We took training for that. I think without training, you cannot learn the nitty-gritties of any product. So now we're storing and we're connecting it to Google Site. And again, accessibility is given accordingly. So I know that, let's say, website material, and we've made that folder on our shared drive. So as Monica was saying, that Teams is like shared drive. On our shared drive, we've made separate folders. And would it be okay if I show it actually? And just a quick, yeah. So let's say this is our shared drive. Can you see the shared drive?
Yes, we can see it.
So these are the different folders we created. Now each one of them has we've given different accessibility to our board members, to our staff. And in that, you can assign them different roles. So if you just want them to be a viewer, this is what we do for most of the documents that we're using on our website, because we don't want people to make changes to it. They can download it, but so there's viewer, there's commentator, there's what's the other one? The editor. So you can assign different roles to it. Okay. So yeah, that accessibility is so easy. The other thing which was very good in Google Drive is making shortcuts. So for example, what I do at my end, I provide on a monthly basis an update of all the deliverables or let's say projects that come under MTML to the board. So instead of making all those sheets or sending them the link again, you can create shortcuts. So they're in their folders. You don't want them to go in separate folders, do it in the board members folder. Create a shortcut there. Whatever changes I make to that monthly updates will automatically be updated at that end. So I think it's so easy and it avoids a lot of waste of time. I mean, I know from a lot of our service providers, they said, you're sending too many emails to us. So what we did was we just send them, let's say, one monthly review. So towards the end of the month, we create a monthly review with all those links. So they don't have to open up all those emails. And especially in Gmail, it's a whole thread. And when you have to search for a single link, it drives you crazy. And again, listening to Angela about Teams, it reminded me of Asana. We're using Asana. So the point that I was talking about forms, where we were using it as an action plan, and we thought that, okay, we're sending too many reminders to each other. People are forgetting what their task is. So now we've turned to Asana. That's a project management tool. And we've got different projects. So we've, again, and I'm a very visual person. So I'm just going to show you how it looks. And again, it's nothing, I'm not marketing for anyone. It's just, I think our life has become very easy when we turn to this, but we have to make a process. I think that is so important. Have a process, what needs to be stored, what needs to be kept on Asana. So for example, I'll tell you that we have a smartphone project, which is totally different than our deliverables. We have created a process in it that shows that, let's say, draft forms of documents can be stored in Asana. But once finalized documents are kept, they should not be stored there. It should be going on the shared drive. So these are just small things, I think, which I'm a process person. I need to see things, the steps. Steps are very important. Where it needs to be stored, who gets access, how do you do it, whom to assign. Setting up that process in order to be organized digitally is very important. So this is from my end.
Great. Thanks so much, Ambreen, for sharing with us. It's nice to see the different tools that people use. So I know some programs are on the Microsoft suite and others on the Google suite, and see how you've been able to tap into the different functions to address the challenges that you were faced with. And so I guess the last person who will kind of address this question, sorry, Anita, I know you've been patiently waiting in the wings there. So maybe you could give us your take on this question.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to share my screen. We went from using Outlook as our calendar and organization and the Microsoft Office suite, strictly complete changeover to Google. We are community-based, so we have the smallest budget humanly possible. So the fact that the Google suite was no charge for not-for-profit was hugely desirable. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and show you how we organized some of our drives. Excuse me. So I'm going to, let me see if I can, there we go. So first of all, we had a bit of a hard time because we all had a different idea of what organization looked like. So after some thought, we agreed we were using a document, a file audit checklist. And so I'm just going to scroll through that quickly, but you'll see the order of things. And blue is everything that our coordinators do and add to a file. And the beige is everything the instructor would add. And so what we did is we took that as our framework, and you can see our files. We have our referral in client, and when I click on that, we have all of the documents that we would use for that referral process. And then you can see additional documents that we were, these are instructions as to how we would do that referral. And what we did is we did this in a twofold manner so that when we had a new coordinator, because we had some changes in staff through all of this as well, and we use our file audit checklist and that process as a training tool as well. So we did that for coordinators. I'm going to show you 4 different drives. The other thing we had a hard time with was determining learning activities. So we used, again, something we always use, a document that, oh, sorry, oh, no, I don't want that one. A document that we always refer to, and I'm sure many of you do as well. And we took this document, the Matching Milestones to the OALCF Curriculum Framework, and that's how we organized the folder. So I'm going to go back to my drive, and you'll see that we have find and use information, which is the same color. We color-coded it. I'll go into the first one. We use the labeling system, the same sorting system as in the graph and document. Come on. And then we added learning activities that were pertinent to that particular topic. And again, this can be used for someone who is new. It's a way of following a process, and which is really difficult when you're trying to do everything virtually. So we've trained a couple of our staff completely virtually, which thank goodness they're young and very adept at technology, etc. So then I decided to take it a step further because every time we have a board meeting, I have somebody or 2 somebodies from the board sending me messages going, I can't find the email with my board papers. So I brought this up at a meeting and said, what do you think? And they thought it was a great idea. And so that's what we've done since then. So you can see that we've sorted this by meeting date. When meeting date is completed, I color it all to the same color. So we know this bright red one, this is the up and coming. And right now, all we have in here is our agenda, because that's coming up. But as I drop things in, they become available to the board members so they can prepare for the board meeting at their leisure. I'll show you a completed meeting. So all of the documents, our budgets, our reports, our ministry reports, our income statement, everything is there, and they can access that at their leisure. And then I thought this is such a good idea. I talked to my bookkeeper and I said, what do you think if I sent you our bank statements and our everything from our banking to a drive? Would you be amenable to that? And they thought that was a great idea. So we just started this a few weeks ago and we're in the process of populating it. You can see that we have, here are our April bank statements. And our April Visa and all of the receipts. And most of those, I do a lot of purchasing online, so I can just upload the receipt that I get in my email. The rest I have to scan. And then we have our reports. Oops, that's an older one, sorry. The reports that are uploaded so that I can access them, so I don't have to drive across town to pick those up, or they don't have to put them in my email and I have to search through 42,000 emails to receive them. So that is the basics. We also decided that searching through my EIOS, and when it's down a lot of the time, we would put some of the CAMS user guides, make them easily accessible, especially for newer staff. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And then one of the things that was very, very helpful is we were in the second year of a community digital tech project. And it was federally funded. And thankfully, we have one of our staff who is very gifted, digitally speaking, and she took this on. And we did a fabulous job. Well, she did a fabulous job. And so we were able to serve a lot of people in our community through that. Additionally, we had some volunteers and some very committed staff that worked with some of our very low-level learners by phone, sitting on a park bench, making sure we did things in a physically distanced manner, but making sure we got the appropriate learning activities and books, etc., tools that these folks needed delivered to them. And further to that, we went to some of our community partners that have a much bigger budget than we do, and we know that they have great technology, and we also know that they roll that over about every 3 years. And so we're top of the list for their donations. And then what we did is redistribute all of that technology, all of those laptops and desktop computers to our learners, because most of the folks that we provide service to are living in poverty and cannot afford these things. So it was a challenge. I have amazing staff, and as much as I am the lead procrastinator sometimes, I think we've really made great headway. And I think Monica, I'm surprised she wasn't quite frustrated with us, but her training was more than anyone could have ever wished for. So we very much appreciate that. And thank you for the opportunity to share what we did with some of you.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Anita, for showing us, giving us the deep dive into your Google setup, for the kind words for Monica. I just want to shout out, I think Monica is exceptional working with her. I know she does amazing work with the program she works with as well. But yeah, amazing to see what you've created and how you've configured that Google Drive. I think a lot of us were impressed with the color-coded folders and how you linked them to progress, tracking, and done and upcoming, those kinds of things. So very, very nice to see that. Thank you so much for sharing that with us, Anita, and how you overcame those challenges in this new digital era that we're all living in. So I guess we'll wrap up with the last question that we have. Monica, if you wanted to just share or put up on the screen that fourth question, Thanks so much. So with everyone, I just will drop the order again in the chat. So this is just a few final words from everyone about, what is there an advice or a tool or resource tip that you'd like to share with us as a takeaway from everything that you've just shared. And so I'll have Angela start us off, and then Anita, Ambreen, and then Sandy, Rosemary from the Learning Place. Angela, I'll let you take it away.
All right, thanks, Alethea. Yeah, so I think there's a slide coming up there to talk about a few main tips here. I can pull it up while we're reading. One of my issues that I kind of had brought up as we were discussing is I'd look up something online and then later discover that things are a bit more nuanced than articles tend to let on, just based on your organization and the capacity and different tools you have access to, and sort of like there's other little inner workings of programs that you don't really understand or can't get the hang of just from reading necessarily. So talking to people, talking to reading, but then talking. So I would go back and forth between having these more in-depth conversations with Alethea, where sometimes those conversations would lead me to coming up with questions that I wouldn't have known to ask otherwise. And so then I could go to IT and go, okay, IT typically I would just ask like a specific question and I get a specific answer. And so trying to kind of probe more to IT to see is there really a solution here, and it turned out that there was, as I kind of was able to ask better questions. So yeah, talking to different people who do know things more than me was really helpful. And then the logistics piece, and I think it was Anita talking about it as well, kind of thinking how do you want to organize this? It's a lot of forethought to really see how is it all going to fit together in a logical way, and even if you try and put those pieces or answer all those questions up front, inevitably you're going to encounter something that you didn't think of and kind of need to troubleshoot or tweak a little bit. But really trying to hammer down some of those logistic pieces beforehand, and again it kind of comes back to talking, or brainstorming with other people, or seeing different interpretations of ideas as well, because that kind of helps you narrow things down as you start to see like that people kind of had different interpretations of details or of the vision and things like that. So that really helps you kind of narrow things down. And then one thing we're still pending is that third bullet there of number 2 is have like an internal audit or check system to see how things are going, and if they're working properly once you get going. So we had one for the paper file, but we haven't converted it for the digital world yet. So that's something just to make sure that things are where we think they are.
So thank you so much, Angela, for sharing those takeaways. I think that's like and a lot of them I think are very transferable and across the board for a lot of us in the program. So that's great. And then Anita, I'll flip it back to you if you want to share with us.
I have to agree with Angela. One of the things, being the leader of an organization, I feel like I am so clear in my communication, and boy, was I not. It was a bit of a comeuppance, but I thought I was conveying my information very efficiently, and it made perfect sense to me. And I ran it by a couple of other staff, and it made sense to them. But there's more than just 3 of us or 2 of us. So that piece, that communication piece, when you're not together in person and able to sort of ask the questions and have that sort of organic flow, that was really tough, really, really tough. So going back to a document that is a living document that we have all put together ourselves as a group and all use every day, was a really good way, a really good framework for starting our organization. And we're still in that process. So that's the biggest, I would say the biggest takeaway for us was, for me anyway, was, wow, thinking we are clearly communicating sometimes is not at all what we think. And so that part is huge. The other thing is, I believe, I've worked in systems in my previous career in manufacturing. I've worked in manufacturing software systems. And one of the things I've learned in 3 different systems in that area, and then 2 in this part of my life, is that you need to be committed. You really need to be committed to this system, not to adapting it to this. And you need to look at it and look at the parameters and the restrictions of that, and decide that you're going to be committed to using that and using it fully. And once you have that mindset, I find things work a lot better, rather than, well, I don't really like this part of it, I don't really like that part of it. Just dive in. And as far as the Google Suite is concerned, call Monica, because she is amazing.
Thanks, Anita.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks so much, Anita, for that. Ambreen, do you want to share with us your final thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, it's mainly going to be a reiteration of what Angela and Anita said. But yes, I do believe training is so important. And continuously, we've been taking training from Monica through Alpha Plus, so that is great. I always say that if you fear something, you should still go ahead and do it. Digitization may sound very challenging and fearful. Initially, it is. But once you get into the flow, it becomes easy. I mean, think of the bigger picture. In the long run, it is so organized and easy. Again, for that, it's very important we should have processes to which everybody agrees. So yes, I agree with what Anita said. We assume that people might know what we're trying to say, but it's not that way. I mean, there's so much in the brain, and I mean, sometimes you ask the question, what does that mean? And they say, you don't know? So instead of assuming, I'll give you a very good example. Currently, we started a new project, and while our staff, we were just 2 staff in MTML, we added 3 more people. Now, that project is all online, and we knew that communication, remote communication is sort of challenging, because you have to make sure that everybody's on the same page. So what we did was we've created a document which we've discussed with the whole team. This is how things will work. This is how we have to digitize things, or this is how we have to store things, or, so that discussion is very important. Everybody should make it very clear and concise what is required. So expectations, setting expectations in remote learning, even with your learners, I think that is so important. And yeah, I mean, for us, Google Shared Drive worked excellent. It's so easy for us to just look at things instead of asking each other questions, because sometimes, answering the same question and again, everybody gets frustrated. So if we shared it on the drive, there's a process there. People can go back, even after 10 years, they can go back and say, okay, this is what was done. So it has to be very clear and concise. I think that's the way it becomes organized. Making things organized on digitally becomes easier when you know what you have to do. And talking to the staff, again, is so important. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks so much, Ambreen, for that. I like the continuity, I think, of the themes that everyone has been sharing so far. It's really nice to see that. Sandy and Rosemary, or the Learning Place, we will pass it over to you.
Yeah. Hello again. So I want to say that what we learned as an organization, and also what we learned as a organization and learners together, as we're presenting today from the learners' perspective on how to use digital technology. to digitize the work. So I would say we learn how to use and pick up the right tools that we need to use as a staff to communicate together, starting from maybe a tool to organize our documents, the intake, what we mentioned before as Synology. And we didn't have a chance today to present the Synology for you. And I know that there was some questions about it. We didn't have enough time. We're just presenting from a learner perspective. But if you have any question about Synology, please just email us, me or Sandy, and we can provide you with more information about it. Also, we found that communicating between us as a team is extremely important, as we use different type of tools like Google Chat for instant messages, to communicate through emails. We communicate also through Synology itself. We can synchronize information and we can share information. We use also Google Docs to communicate between us and our learner in sharing documents. Also, I would like to talk about our recent initiative as an organization to ease the difficulties to reach our digital literacy learners who have a very low digital literacy skills, as we initiated our YouTube channel, where we were able to post our videos to our learners as a visual aid for them, as they have low digital skills, to be able to watch videos, learn some skills so they can communicate and implement in their devices. Different tools we used like Google Sites, G Suite, Zoom for communication between us and our learners, and between also us as a staff together. Rosemary, do you have anything to add? You're muted.
Sorry about that. What I would say is, based on my experience at the learning place, I have gained so much confidence in working with digital tools. My advice would be that it is very important to be digital literacy in today's world. And I will also advise that we shouldn't hide our literacy. Like, if we don't know it, try and find a help to learn about the digital things that is going on, because we are in the digital world, and no matter where you go or whatever you do, you will need the computer, or you need the tools that is going on in this world now. Some of us will be working from home or in the near future, or doing things that you will need the literacy, digital literacy. So I will advise others who are like me, or who were like me, to try and open up to learn. Thank you.
Thank you, Rose.
Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you. Yeah, thank you both for sharing your experiences and kind of tying up and wrapping up this segment for us. I feel like from everything that was shared, from the first question to the last question, like, if I can summarize, I feel like there's like 4 keywords and themes that keep coming up. And I think the first one is tools, and the second one is process. The third one I think of is communication, and the fourth is training. There's other ones, but I feel like those are really solid themes that have been recurring as we're thinking about organizing and digitizing the space that we're now working in around teaching and learning. So thank you, everyone. I just wanted to really thank the guest presenters for being with us, sharing with us your day-to-day operations. I know a lot of it is also still work in progress and very open to iteration and improvement, but it's so nice to see the openness and the transparency across the field, and sharing with one another what you're learning and what you're trying to improve. So thank you for that. And thank you to everyone who's present and in the audience who's been participating and nurturing this discussion too. It's really, really great to have you with us. I think as Monica has shared in the chat, we just wanted to give a bit of time as well for people to reflect and kind of debrief in smaller groups. I'm not sure how much, I think, yeah, Monica's mentioning 10 minutes. So it will be kind of a short, kind of lightning little breakout room. And so Monica, I'll let you maybe set that up. The question that we kind of had for these little discussions was just to reflect on the discussion. And as you're reflecting, I guess, on the discussion, what are the kind of tips and questions that you would like to share related to anything that you heard today? And then we'll kind of wrap. So we'll recapture you after the 10 minutes, and then have in the main room debrief, and hopefully try to capture some of those questions so that we can follow up afterwards. So I hope that's all right. Monica, I'll maybe hand it over to you to coordinate the breakout rooms.
Sure. Thanks, Alicia. And I know we don't have that much time, but sometimes just meeting somebody or having a chance to debrief makes a bit of a difference. So I am going to launch the breakout rooms. If you are staying behind and you get into a room that doesn't have too many participants, just come back. We'll assign you to a different room. And for our deaf participants, my suggestion is just to stay in the main room, so then you can chat with each other in the main room as well. You can turn on the videos, and we'll try and see if that works, so that our interpreters are staying with us in the main room. Is that okay with you, Gloria and Peggy?
Hello, it's Gloria. Peggy's working. Whatever you all is best is fine with us.
Perfect. Okay, so I'm going to launch it. Your potentially will have a pop-up, and we'll try to come back at 3:25, and then we'll have a very quick chat and take a break. Okay, so we are coming back at around 3:25. If you're not staying, thank you so much for joining us, and enjoy the rest of the day. All right, Olivia, I still have you on the spotlight. So it's one of the things for our deaf participants is I sometimes don't recognize who is who. So if you're staying in the main room, we do have the interpreters here, and really want to encourage you to chat. I can try to put spotlights on you if you have your videos on. That way you will be able to see each other as well.
And Greg just said he's staying put.
Okay, perfect. All right. So Greg, thank you for staying and chatting with us in the main room. I'm just checking who else is here and who didn't leave. Any reflections about today, about what you learned? What did really was nice for you to learn, or new that you may want to reflect on?
I thought some of it was pretty cool. I thought just as in terms of the filing system, how to organize that. I mean, we've closed our office, and I haven't been in my office for the last couple of years, and so we can't get our paper files, which is nuts for us. So everything has sort of been e-filed, including our learner files. So that's been easier. So it was nice today to talk about a little bit about resources and how that gets managed,
okay,
and how that all gets sort of digitized.
Okay,
how we're using ebooks, how learners. How we have access to learners' information, all of that kind of stuff.
perfect. Yeah. Perfect. Anybody else that may want to reflect? I can see Simone is here with us. Kim, Kathy, any reflections from you?
Hello. I thought it was good. Simone speaking. I thought it was good. I learned some stuff for sure. I asked that whole piece about shelf life. I had never actually heard us talk about something like that. So some of the bits were interesting. I didn't know that hearing people refer to keeping documents as shelf life. I didn't even know that there's a certain amount of a time that you have to hold on to material. I didn't know that. So I didn't know too much about that.
Mm-hmm. I think it's when you think of our tax documents, I think it's 7 years. So I think the ministry is applying similar approach to some of the files that the organization has to officially and legally keep as well. But as Ambreen was talking about moving to just online, who is going to store all those boxes? Where are they going to be kept, right? So it was amazing to hear how they decided to digitize some of them so that they actually can have access to them no matter where they are.
Okay.
Anybody else that may want to speak up or chat about your experiences?
That's great. I'll go. Yeah, one of the things I struggle with is sometimes when I send out a flyer, let's say for registration for a class or workshop or whatever, let's say it's in the evening, I get, a couple people that are interested in the workshop or whatever. And, I have room for 10 students. So how to sort of go after those 8, let's say, students that haven't replied, how to follow up with them, using Google Forms for that. So typically I'll send out and I'll get, we get email responses because that's typically, how we manage. But like talking today about Google Forms and being able to sort of access whether people have registered by yes or no's, that would be, I think, a neat idea.
Oh, that's a really good idea. Yeah. Perfect. All right. Anybody else who may want to chat or chime in?
I wondered if the people who are using Google Suites had any trouble getting authenticated.
Okay.
That was an issue for us. So
and was it for the learners or for the instructors?
For the instructors.
Okay. And what error did you receive?
You have to go through steps to get Google Suites as a mission. Okay. So I'm just using the personal one for free, yes, and then sharing individual folders.
Okay.
I think it was just a technical issue that you had to authenticate the website, and it was beyond what our IT person had access to.
Yeah, it's very unusual. I haven't heard of that before, unless in the Google site settings, there was something where only those who are a member of an organization can join in, or sometimes that happens as well. But we see that usually with Google Workspace setups where you have an admin and that admin can sort of issue email addresses for staff members. And the site is set up only for those staff members to go in. So any general public will not be able to. So then you run into authentication issues. Or sometimes your learners, when they set up their Google accounts, they may set up 2-stage authentication or something where the system is trying to confirm and they're kind of not able to pass that process and are getting stuck a bit as well. Yes. So what we have seen some organizations choosing to do is actually still applying for Google Workspace. And if they have learners who struggle, and this is Google Workspace for nonprofits, where they get it for free, and then basically issuing special email addresses to learners. So they're not using their regular Gmail address, they're actually using email issued by the organization. It's still a Google account, but it's easier for the organization to reset their passwords if necessary.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Anybody else? I can see Jim Tissick is with us here. Jim, I'm calling on you. I know you were looking at Google Sites a bit. Have you implemented anything? Oh, and you're muted, I think.
I started a little bit, but just haven't put the time in. So, okay. Yeah, I'm still interested, especially seeing that nice one on Metro.
Perfect. It's amazing to see how different programs use different tools. And sometimes when we get asked what's better, it's really hard to answer because it all depends on the organization, what they can afford or have access to, the staff skills, and even just the specific needs of the learners and instructors. So we have seen, the Microsoft side with Teams, with SharePoint and how that works. And then, we're looking at the Google side for some organizations and how they have been organizing their content. And then also those processes, right? The color coding, the file naming, documentation to go with that, to remember or to make sure that everybody's following similar systems. That takes time. Don't get me wrong. I think, as an organization ourselves, we also take time to organize and really follow our systems and understand why we named something this way or where did it go. But it's a learning process. And as we use it more and more, we are really getting used to it as well. Yeah. And I'm just very mindful of time. So it's 3:25. If you don't mind, I'm going to close the breakout rooms and make sure the rest of the group comes back to us before 3:30, because we really want to give you a few minutes of a break as well for you, for our interpreters, and for everybody else. And after we close the breakout rooms and come back and say goodbye, if you want to stay, we are going to do tech Q&A. And what I mean by that is I do have a few slides to have a conversation. So some of the questions about Google Drive labeling and things like that, we may be able to answer after the break. But if you can stay, we totally understand as well. And we thank you for your participation. Okay. So it's going to take a few more seconds before the rest of the group comes back. 22 seconds to be precise. But it's nice to kind of take the time. So if you're noting down some tips, some ideas, even after our session, take some time. And I think there was a question how soon the recording will be available. I really hope to be able to process it by tomorrow and have everything posted back. So I'm going to repeat that for everyone when everybody joins back. Okay. So let's see if everybody's back. Let me just take a quick look at our group. Perfect. Look at all the faces. If you're in the gallery view, you're going to see everybody still with some of the videos on as you're joining back for the end of the session, at least for the end of the panel discussion. Alithia, do you want to do a few wrap-up words? I know it's almost time to finish before we take a quick break.
No, just, I mean, I think I really tried to express before. I know a few people had to drop, but yeah, just amazing. Thank you for being here. I feel like we've learned so much from one another, the guest presenters sharing their work, but also I think in the programs, and I'm sure in the breakout rooms, having really fruitful discussions. So just, yeah, amazing. I'm just amazed by the programs and the sharing and what the kind of journey that we're all on together around teaching and learning in the digital space. So
exactly. So thank you to all of you. I really hope you had some nice chats in the breakout rooms. I know some of your breakout rooms were a bit bigger, others were a bit smaller. And then for those of you who stayed with us in the main room, we really got some good reflections as well. If you are staying for the break and after the break for the tech Q&A, we really want to address maybe some of your reflections as well. If there was something you really kind of picked up, even during the breakout room, feel free to put it in the chat for us. We are going to save the chat so we can use it as a way to combine some of the information and resources together. And in the chat, we also had a question about the recording. We really hope to process it by tomorrow. Sometimes it takes a bit of time to upload, to kind of edit some of the pieces we may not want to use or need, like the introduction when we are setting up. But we want to make sure you have it accessible. So tomorrow, latest Thursday, you're going to receive an email, a follow-up email from us with the recording, the slides, whatever we can share with you, we want to share, so you will have access to all this information as well. Okay, so for now, thank you so much for sticking around with us, for sharing, for asking lots of questions. And let's take a bit of a break. So it's 3:28. Let's come back at around 3:33 if you're planning to stay for the rest of the session. We are planning to work until 4 o'clock, but this is going to be a bit more collaborative part. So we will be addressing some of your questions or still discussing some of the tips that we heard earlier. Okay, so let's come back at around 3:33 and we're going to resume a bit more. All right, thank you. Okay, so it is 3:34. I know everybody is just coming back. But let's see if we can start some of our conversation going. Thank you for sticking around, everyone. And Alithia, I just realized we didn't do the feedback form before people left. So we'll email that to everyone. But for those of you who are staying, please don't leave before you do our feedback form at the end of today. And I can see Jim posted a question in the chat about what people are including in the online learner files. So we may be able to go back to what Angela shared with us, which was some of the template with the types of files that she was sharing. So I'll try to find that as we are chatting today. But I thought that for our tech Q&A, there were a few things that we were picking up from the discussion and what our guest presenters were chatting about. And it was really discussing the drives. And I know, and I have seen a few extra questions about Google Drive, SharePoint, and so on. So I thought maybe we can do a brief discussion about that as well, and also the processes. So I think if you really watched what Angela and Anita shared during the session, you would notice that there was a lot of discussions about documenting things and then figure out the processes as you're working on them as well. So we want to make sure that that gets touched on as well. I'm going to add myself as a spotlight just in case you may want to see me a bit bigger. And of course, anybody else who wants to speak or chat is welcome, and I can spotlight you for the rest of the group as well. And then of course, lessons and tips, whatever we can think of, whatever we can share, feel free to share that in the group, in the discussion, or in the chat. Again, we will be picking up all that information, trying to compile it for you, so it becomes a great resource for you as well. Any questions at this point? Okay, feel free to put them in the chat. I will be very happy to monitor and make sure that we answer all of them. Okay, so this is just a slide for me, and this is not very visual slide, but a lot of times when we talk to programs or we work with programs, we have that discussion of SharePoint Drive, shared drives, my drive, OneDrive, and I'm slowing down because I know for our interpreters it may be a bit tricky. So it can be really, really tricky for all of us even to remember and distinguish between them. And we often mention personal type of drives versus team drives. So I thought I'll just take a few minutes to refresh everyone on that and then answer any questions if you have them around the drives themselves. So if your organization is using Microsoft, very often you will have access to something called OneDrive. And many of us will often understand that we can create files and folders, and we can invite others to have access to those files and folders. Similar tool is in Google Drive, and that one is called My Drive. So that's why it's just so close to each other that it's hard to differentiate. We call them personal because they are created by us personally. We create the file and folder, and we decide who will have access to them. We can say nobody will have access, and that's okay as well. Now, when it comes to other types of drives, those team drives we are talking about, that's the ones where the decision or permissions are decided in a slightly different way. So if we talk about SharePoint from Microsoft, it often is part of your teams. So in Microsoft, you can be a member of a team, and as a member of a team, you can have access to different tools that support that team application. One of them is SharePoint. And that is almost like a drive for that entire team. So anything that gets saved in that drive, the team can see. So it's not as personal anymore because it belongs to the team. Okay, now when we think about Google Drive, there's something called shared drives. Not everybody can see shared drive. If you are using a regular Gmail account, not Google Workspace account or organizational account, you will actually not see shared drives at all. Those are introduced for businesses, nonprofits, organizations, and you have to have Google Workspace to have access to that. But what they do is they become boxes, bins, whatever you may want to call them. I call them containers, where a team can drop files and folders and have permissions to access anything in that file or folder at any time. So I have been trying to think about references, how we can compare it to real life situation. And this may not be the best one, but I hope it will help. The way I can think of it is if you have personal drives like OneDrive or My Drive, you're giving a key to somebody else to have access to your file or folder. The way you may give a key to somebody, if you want them to have access to your room, or maybe a floor that you have access to. You're giving them a key, you can always take that key back, and you're the one deciding who gets that key. Now, if you think of the shared drives or the team access, I think of it as the pass card we get when we work in a building. So the pass card gets issued to everyone. Let's assume that pass card gives access to the entire building, and that's how the shared drive will work. So as soon as you get added to that drive, you have access to everything within that drive. And it's usually administrators who will decide who is member or who has access to everything in that drive. So it works in a slightly different way in how we are accessing those files and folders. When Anita and Ambreen and Angela today, when they were talking about how they organize their files, they were deciding, do we do kind of one folder and then invite people to it? Or do we do a shared drive and sometimes multiple drives for different purposes? Like Anita, you mentioned you did a board drive where only board members will have access to it, and you as the executive director, where the team doesn't have access to it. So you gave them that pass specifically for that drive. The staff members do not have access to it. Where another drive that you may have shared is something where only staff members have access to, but not the board members anymore. So you have been dividing and distinguishing between those as well. And then can you share with us how has that been working for you?
That's been working really well because it doesn't sort of bog down people with information they don't need. On our original server, everything was on there, and we did have drives on our servers that differentiated, but I find the Google Drives to be a little more streamlined, a little simpler, not so many steps. I find it very easy to use. And I have to laugh because one of my sons said, Mom, why are you not looking into this? Why are you not looking into this? Why are you not looking into this? Security is good. And he's a tech person for large corporations. And he said, this is really what you need to be doing for your organization. Mm-hmm. He's been saying that for a couple of years. And then prior to Monica and Alan approaching us. So when I told him that we did this, he was thrilled. He was really pleased, but he said, you could have done this 2 years ago.
That's amazing. But we're all learning, right? And then there is the trust issue, right? So the security comes up a lot. And then organizations, like a lot of school boards, colleges, may be using Microsoft products. They have a tech team, they have admin department, they manage all that. So it's a bit easier for them to kind of stick and use those tools because they have the tech behind. For smaller organizations, it's trickier and harder sometimes. So we are trying to sort of find ways where other tools may be a bit easier or to manage or to get access to as well. And I see Alan is here with us as well. Thank you, Alan, for sticking around as well. One of the things that I just wanted to mention, I'm not going to share the screen, but at Alpha Plus, we have conversations about external drives and internal drives. So, we all use shared drives as well, but we are trying to organize our information also in specific ways. So, Alan, I don't know if you want to mention anything around that and why we are doing it the way we are doing it. And also, we are doing it by year. Don't forget to unmute yourself.
Oh, yeah. Thanks, Monica. Yeah, no, we run in both. We have an Office 365 or Microsoft 365 instance that we use for some kinds of records, like the financial records and those kinds of things we have tended to keep there. And then the staff team, Monica and Alethea, the rest of us all tend to work on a day-to-day basis in the Google Workspace. And then the board also works in the Google Workspace with either like a My Drive piece or a shared drive piece. The problem that we have with the shared drives has been for people who don't have a Gmail account. So an outside board member who has a Hotmail account and they don't really want another Gmail account. They don't quite understand that they don't need to use the email piece of it. They could just simply use it as a label to a Google account. They can't get into a shared drive in the same kind of way. And maybe that'll change eventually, but that's been a bit of a bump that we run into for people who you don't have control over, like a board member, and you can't twist their arm to get a Google account or a Gmail account, or they don't quite understand the difference, that we've used the My Drive option rather than the shared drive option. Other than that, it's worked fairly well, I'd say.
Yes. And it's for us with the learning about shared drives is this idea that it's a container where we drop things and then other people have access to it. So that idea of eliminating emails, forwarding the messages back and forth. I want to see what Alithia did with a program. I don't have to go and bug her about that. I can just go into the shared drive, see her folder for that organization and access the information. So it makes it a lot easier internally. And I think, Anita, you also mentioned that makes such a huge difference for the team to streamline so many of the processes. And as we get used to it, it makes a difference so that we just naturally go to a specific section and we know where to look for information, reducing the time it takes to find it. Anybody else that may want to share some of the ways you are using that we didn't have a chance to hear from you during the main panel discussion? Something different, something unique that may be working for you very well?
Monica, it's Anita. I just wanted to say one thing we've been doing is we've been using the calendars, which doesn't sound very exciting at all, but for me, having 3 centers, it's a challenge because I'm an hour and a half from one center and an hour from the other if I'm at the head office. And I can have everyone share their calendar and I just tick on it. It automatically populates. I can see where everyone is and then I can untick it and it's off my calendar, which sounds a little cumbersome, but it's easier than phoning everyone or texting or emailing. I know where anyone is at any given time, and it's very convenient.
Yes.
It's a small thing and super, super efficient.
Absolutely. So again, going back to the tools, like if you're a member of a team, within Teams, you have your communication channel and you can chat with each other. With the Google products, we're adding emails, we're adding Google Chat. That may be very helpful and useful as well. But as a package, it makes a difference in communicating and connecting. And I don't know if Janet is still here with us as well, but Janet is one of my other programs we are working with this year. And we started using Google Chat with each other so that when we are meeting or connecting, we are not emailing as much anymore. We are actually chatting with each other. Is that correct, Janet? Just don't forget to unmute if you want to speak up.
No, I've found every bit of your mentoring amazing. And I'm coming away from this.
It's about the tools.
Sorry, I have no qualms pitching. No, amazing process. So much to learn, and I'm coming away from this with another tool. Signing up for Asana while we're talking.
There you go. There are many different tools, so it just depends on the purpose. But it's nice to see how programs are trying to do those workflows and processes that will work for them, whether it is within Planner, Asana, or even Anita for the programs. I think there were discussions that instructors may be moving files from folder to folder as they're progressing. And I don't remember at this point what decision was made at the end, but I know those are some of the things that can make a difference, like even just renaming the file, right? To add a note or something like that. Yeah.
Well, I got, Janet had a question about the security around Google, and I answered a little bit of it in the chat, but the one thing so in terms of the way Google's built, it would be very secure. Where you run into an issue is in your own implementation. So if you're a sloppy administrator in your own local organization and don't put good passwords on things and allow public access to every file, it's not secure. But that's all within your world. It's not Google's fault. And so that's where you would run into an issue. So one of the things that we do at Alpha Plus is we tend to sort of very clearly label things which are meant for outside of the organization. So if it's a public or anything external, it will go into those kinds of shared drives. If it's meant to be internal and never be shared with anyone outside of the organization, it's in a different set of shared drives. And so it just makes it very clear for people who might potentially see something. And that's all internal. It's nothing to do with the way Google has implemented anything or an employee at Google sharing my information or anyone hacking a URL or anything like that. It's all just a potential sloppiness at our in-house, really.
And I guess I assumed it was fairly safe. Just knowing the school boards are using it means that it has to have a decent level of security. But you're right, the internal thing is important, and we're just in the process now. So we've got the folders set up, and I'm just giving permission for those specific folders right now until I figure it out and have that confidence.
Yeah, where it always breaks down is there's just one one employee who makes one mistake somewhere down the line, and you can't rule that out in any way. It's just training and reminding and those kinds of things. Even the security firms, run into these kinds of issues with someone who just has a bad day and doesn't do something and just goes sideways, and you don't have that much control over it.
So I'm going to pause for a second. I wanted to move to processes and just kind of talk about that. And this is really from my experience of working with some of the programs. And many of you are here with us today. And that idea of coming up with decisions, right? So we talked about having a special drive for the board, a special drive or collection of drives for content you're sharing with your colleagues. There also may be space for something you're sharing with your learners. So instructors could actually set up folders and have those shared with the learners so the learners can access them from their own accounts. So making those decisions on how you're going to set it up, how you're going to name it, what's going to be there, those are all parts of it. And also external partners. So we, as an example, again, of Alpha Plus, we sometimes work with somebody from communications, editors. So we create drives where they will have access to it, but they will not have access to our internal content that we are sharing as a team. So we are very specific in the way we are organizing that information as well. For example, some of the files and folders we are sharing with you today are links to the documents. We put them in external drives because you are external clients coming into Alpha Plus, accessing our resources. So it takes time to get used to it, and sometimes adjustments and learning as you go. And we have to fix sometimes our own mistakes because we forgot to put in the right drive. But it's a process, and the more you're mindful of that, the more you think about that, the bigger difference it may make as well. And that takes us to documentation. Because not everyone is very good with documentation. Many people are, and don't get me wrong, I think we have amazing teams who are very organized. But working with programs, and I'm really referring back to Anita's program again, I have seen how the team was coming together to organize and document all this information. And even internally with our team members, we all have different ways of organizing our information. I may be naming files by the year, somebody else may be by the name, somebody by the last name of the organization or the staff member. So we all have different systems that we may have used before, or we may want to explore. But as a team, we need to agree on a system that will work for all of us. Otherwise, it just starts falling apart. And sometimes we may have to kind of meet and review and come back and say, well, listen, this is not in the right folder, or maybe will be a better way of doing things. So clarifying what tools you're using, if you're using new tools as well, deciding what kind of overview of folders you're going to have. How many? How are they going to be called? If you have a learner plan and you're working with learners and another instructor has to take over, where will they find the information that, for that learner? So the more you work together, the more you organize this information will make a very big difference. The permissions we just talked about, they will make a difference as well, but that file naming convention will be very important too. Do you have any examples where you are sitting in your drive looking for files and folders and can't find them only because somebody else maybe renamed it or named it in a different way that you may have expected? You can just give me a thumbs up or nod, whatever works for you. I know it happens to all of us. But it is important. It is important. So the more you can document it, have really almost like a template with tips. When you're working on this type of content, it should be sitting in this drive or this folder. When you're naming, do we add a year at the beginning? What do we want to see on top of our file list? All those pieces, the more you work as a team and structure that, the bigger difference it will make for you as well. And then I want to open the floor again to the discussion about the lessons, right? So I know we have to involve the team. One person can do it all, but the more people get involved and the more tips you get, the better your system will get, the more useful it will get, not only for you, but for your organization. And this is my example from Anita. I remember being in a meeting and the team is organizing the files and folders and it's all working very well. And all of a sudden somebody says, but I'm at a different location and I don't have access to this drive, right? So if that person wasn't there, we would never even think about that. How do we allow, if necessary, access for somebody who is in a different location? And how we do set up all those permissions so that we protect the client's information as well. And we are making sure that we follow all the guidelines. And then, so those suggestions that are coming in, they will make it better and stronger. So keep that in mind. And then test various systems, different layouts, different setups that you're working with. Anita, your tip about color coding, I think that was just, a huge thing for everyone today. We know we can color code, but we kind of didn't think about using that for that kind of purpose. So then if you document somewhere, green means this, red means this, right? And then everybody can go back and have a reminder fairly quickly. They will pick up that now they know this is maybe work in progress, this is final, this is archived, and it goes from there. So it makes a huge difference. So that documentation, mapping can make a huge difference. But I want to open the floor and take a few seconds for the rest of you. Any other tips that you may have found or learned or used in your program that we haven't discussed yet? Again, use the chat if it's easier as well.
I have something. It's Greg.
Let me just spotlight Greg.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Sure. So I'm in Thunder Bay, and just talking about using a Google Drive, like a personal Google Drive. So my storage is almost full, and then I've got to share the information potentially, but I'm running out of space in my personal Google Drive. So can you think of a space where I have more terabytes of space, more memory than I currently have, because I'm sort of limited with what I can keep right now in my Google Drive? Thoughts about that?
Absolutely. And I'm sure everybody else may have other tips. So please, they're welcome. Use the chat if you want to add some other tips. One of the things with Google Drive overall, or your storage space, it's usually around 15 gigabytes. That includes your email. So we forget that our email can take up a lot of space in our storage. So all the files, videos, and things you may be sending, those are also counting for your storage that, is getting limited. So some users, including me, even on a personal level, I upgraded my account. It's around $3 a month that I pay for much larger storage. And that way I can keep more files. If your organization allows, you may think also of looking at Google Workspace again for nonprofits, where the shared drives we see, the team drives that we are looking at, they have a lot more storage. It's almost in terabytes when they talk about that. So any videos, any things you're sharing that may take a lot of space, we always suggest to put them in those shared drives because they're not counting against your personal drive that you have as well. And in the Google Workspace accounts, you get 30 gigabytes even for your personal content besides the shared drive. So automatically it's bigger. So either upgrading your regular Gmail account to get more storage, which you can upgrade, or potentially looking at switching to Google Workspace if your organization or team allows for that. As a nonprofit, potentially you could apply for that as well. Any other tips, Alan? What are you thinking?
No, that's the only options that I can think of, Monica.
Right.
I've had to do the same thing with my own.
Sorry, Alan, I'm going to interrupt just for a second. Oh, you know what? You go, and then I'll go.
With my personal Gmail or Google account, I've done the same thing as Monica. I've had to upgrade my own personal one as well. Yeah.
Go ahead, Greg.
Yeah, just a quick little thing I want to get in. The 15 gigabytes, that includes like your what? Sorry, your documents, your pictures, all of that kind of stuff is included. So that really, I mean, that takes up a ton of space. So right there, yeah. And I mean, it's not just email. I mean, you talked about email, but it's not just email, it's everything.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it could be that you may also purchase external drive. So, something that you can plug into your computer. Sorry, I'm just pulling it because it's right here.
I got that.
And then move some of your photos or videos that you may not be using or archiving into that. So that will, again, free up some of your space. But it is an ongoing battle with the limited space, which, makes us clean up. But sometimes it's just hard to have time to do that as well. Yeah. Very good questions. Very good questions. Now, I'm very mindful of time. I know it's 4:00. So I'm just going to...
Thank you for hosting. This was great.
No problem. I'm going to share with you one more slide with just link to our feedback form. And I will put that in the chat. So please make sure you fill out our feedback before you go. It always makes such a huge difference for us when we know or learn from you what worked, what didn't work, what we can improve on. So the link is in the chat. And we also just want to remind you that we have another session coming up in June. So your feedback will also feed into that to help us organize and plan ahead. That session will be more about YouTube and TikTok and how organizations are kind of starting to use those tools to attract their learners and to connect with their learners as well. All right. So in the meantime, I think we covered everything else. If not, let me know. But take your time to do the form with the feedback and enjoy the rest of the day, everyone. Thank you.